Ladies and gentlemen, friends and seekers of love, let's talk about something we often overlook. Not the absence of love in our lives, but our fear of feeling it. You see, love isn't just a romantic ideal floating in the clouds. Love is real, raw, exposing. It shines a light on the deepest parts of who we are, both the beautiful and the broken, and that's where the fear lies. So why are we afraid to feel love? First, love requires vulnerability. To truly feel love, you have to open yourself up. That means letting someone see the messy parts, the unpolished you. Vulnerability is brave, but it also makes us feel exposed. And if we've been hurt before, being vulnerable can feel like walking through a battlefield without armor. Second, love can awaken pain we thought we buried. Real intimacy doesn't just bring comfort, it brings old wounds to the surface. That's because when someone gets close, it may remind us of the times we were let down, abandoned, or made to feel unworthy. So we run, not from the person, but from the pain they unknowingly unlock. Third, we crave control. When we're alone, we're in control of our emotions, our routines, our hearts. But love is unpredictable. It challenges that control. It makes us feel things we didn't plan to feel. And for many, that loss of emotional safety is terrifying. So we pull back, because control feels safer than surrender. And finally, perhaps the most profound reason, many of us don't believe we are truly worthy of love. We say we want it, we dream of it, but the moment someone offers us real, nourishing love, respect, care, consistency, it feels foreign, because deep down, we've internalized the belief that love must be earned, chased, or fought for. So when love shows up freely, we question it, we sabotage it, or we push it away. But here's the truth, love is not the enemy, the fear is. To heal that fear, we must go inward. Learn to soothe the parts of us that were never taught how to receive love without fear. Build safety within ourselves so we don't abandon love when it arrives, because love, when it's real, doesn't harm, it heals. So the next time you feel yourself pulling away, ask not, do I love this person, but instead, am I afraid to be loved by them? Thank you. Fear of vulnerability is one of the most powerful and deeply rooted reasons people are afraid to feel love. At first glance, this fear might not be obvious. After all, most people say they want love. They want connection, intimacy, and closeness. But the moment these things start to show up in real life, in the form of a deepening relationship or someone genuinely caring about them, they start to feel uneasy, anxious, or even scared. That emotional discomfort is often a sign that vulnerability is being triggered. Vulnerability means opening yourself up emotionally. It involves showing someone who you really are, not just your polished surface, but your insecurities, your wounds, your quirks, your fears. It means being honest when you're scared, when you need help, or when you're feeling unloved. And for many people, that kind of honesty feels unsafe. One of the reasons for this is that vulnerability, by nature, includes the possibility of getting hurt. When you love someone deeply, you are giving them emotional access to you. They can support you, uplift you, and bring joy into your life. But they also have the power to disappoint you, reject you, or leave. That's a lot of risk, especially if you've had past experiences where your openness was met with pain. Think about a child who cries for comfort and is ignored, criticized, or made to feel like their emotions are too much. That child learns to hide their feelings. They associate emotional expression with rejection or shame. Over time, this becomes a learned behavior in adulthood. If I open up, I will be hurt. If I'm vulnerable, I'll be seen as weak or unworthy. These lessons can be deeply ingrained, often operating below the level of conscious awareness. Now fast forward to adulthood, where that same person finds themselves in a romantic relationship. Everything is going well. The other person is attentive, kind, emotionally available. And yet, there's a creeping fear, a voice in their head saying, don't get too close, don't depend on this, what if it doesn't last? These aren't just irrational thoughts, they are protective mechanisms the brain has built over time. The fear of vulnerability kicks in as a form of self-preservation. It's not that the person doesn't want love. It's that love requires them to show up fully, and that feels dangerous. So instead of leaning in, they create distance. They might withdraw emotionally, pick fights, become critical, or find reasons to leave. All of these behaviors are defenses. They help them feel safe by avoiding the emotional risks that come with vulnerability. Another aspect to consider is the cultural messaging around vulnerability. Many societies teach people, especially men, that to be strong means to be stoic, detached, and emotionally unshakable. Showing emotion, asking for help, or admitting fear is seen as weak. Women, too, are often pressured to always appear composed or self-sacrificing and to avoid being seen as too emotional. These narratives reinforce the idea that it's safer to hide what we feel than to express it openly. But what's missed in all of this is that vulnerability is not weakness. In fact, it's the exact opposite. It takes immense courage to allow someone to see your heart, especially when you know it could be hurt. It takes strength to admit you're scared, to say I love you first, or to trust someone after you've been betrayed. Vulnerability is not about being naive or careless. It's about being authentic in the face of risk. From a psychological perspective, vulnerability is also a key ingredient in intimacy. Without it, relationships remain shallow. Two people can spend years together without ever really knowing each other if neither is willing to be vulnerable. But when vulnerability is present, it creates connection. It says, "This is me, the real me, and I trust you enough to share it." That kind of honesty builds emotional closeness and deep trust. What's important to understand is that fear of vulnerability isn't something that just disappears overnight. It's something that must be acknowledged and worked through. It often requires unlearning old patterns, healing past wounds, and gradually building a sense of emotional safety within oneself. It may also require being with someone who understands that fear and responds with patience, compassion, and consistency. Therapy, self-reflection, journaling, and mindful communication are all tools that can help. Learning to be vulnerable in small ways, sharing a feeling, asking for support, setting a boundary, and start to rewire the brain's association between vulnerability and danger. Over time, these small acts build a foundation of trust not only with others but with yourself. Ultimately, the fear of vulnerability is not a sign that you're broken or incapable of love. It's a sign that you've been through experiences where love, or the appearance of love, was connected to pain. But just because something felt dangerous in the past doesn't mean it always will be. The capacity to love fully and deeply is already inside you. You just have to create the emotional conditions that allow it to grow. And that journey begins by recognizing the fear, honoring its origin, and then slowly, bravely, choosing to lean into love anyway. Love, at its core, is a deeply emotional experience. It touches the most tender parts of us, the parts that long for connection, belonging, and acceptance. But it also has a way of reaching down into the parts of us we may not be fully aware of, the parts that are wounded, neglected, or unresolved. This is one of the reasons why love can feel so intense, and at times even frightening. For many people, love doesn't just bring comfort and joy. It also activates emotional pain from the past that hasn't yet been healed. When we enter a romantic relationship, we are not entering it as blank slates. Each person carries with them a complex history, early childhood experiences, former relationships, emotional patterns, and deeply ingrained beliefs about self, worth, and safety. Much of that emotional material sits just below the surface of our awareness. We may think we've moved on from past experiences, but when we find ourselves in an intimate relationship, those old wounds often resurface. In this way, love becomes a mirror. It reflects back to us all the emotional pain we haven't yet processed. This can be especially true when someone shows us genuine care or affection. For individuals who grew up in environments where love was conditional, inconsistent, or absent, receiving love in a healthy form can feel unfamiliar, even threatening. If a person's early caregivers were emotionally unavailable, critical, or unpredictable, The emotional blueprint that forms in childhood often equates love with instability, fear, or disappointment. As adults, when we start receiving consistent, kind, and real love, that internal blueprint is challenged. It's as if the nervous system says, "This doesn't feel safe. This isn't what love is supposed to be." As a result, we may feel anxious, suspicious, or even emotionally shut down. Unresolved trauma doesn't always show up in dramatic or obvious ways. Sometimes it presents itself through emotional patterns that seem normal or reasonable at first glance: overthinking, fear of abandonment, constant need for reassurance, or an inability to trust. These behaviors aren't just bad habits. They are protective strategies the brain developed to help us survive painful experiences in the past. In the context of love, however, these survival strategies can become barriers. They keep us from fully engaging with our partner, from relaxing into love, and from trusting the emotional connection. One example of this is when someone becomes overly focused on whether their partner will leave them. Even if the partner shows no signs of disinterest, the person may feel a persistent fear that the relationship will end. This anxiety is not about the current relationship. It's about old abandonment wounds being triggered. The emotional body remembers what the mind may have forgotten. So when love starts to feel real, the trauma resurfaces, not to harm us, but because it's asking to be healed. Another common pattern is avoidance. A person might find themselves withdrawing emotionally or physically from their partner when things start getting serious. They might say they're just not ready or need space, when in reality, the closeness is triggering memories of times they were hurt by someone they trusted. The fear isn't about the current partner, it's about the fear of repeating past pain. Avoidance becomes a way to protect the self from emotional injury, but it also prevents the formation of true intimacy. What makes all of this especially difficult is that most people don't consciously recognize these patterns as trauma responses. They may think, "I'm just not good at relationships," or "I always lose interest after a while," or "I'm too sensitive." These explanations miss the deeper truth. Many of the challenges people face in love are not because they're incapable of loving, but because love is waking up old pain that hasn't been addressed. Healing from this kind of trauma requires self-awareness and compassion. It begins with the understanding that your emotional reactions are not flaws, they are signals. When love triggers intense emotions, fear, doubt, insecurity, it's not a sign that something is wrong with the relationship. It may be a sign that something within you is ready to be healed. These emotional responses are invitations to go inward, to explore the origins of your pain, and to give yourself the care you may not have received when the wound was first created. Working through unresolved trauma also involves relearning what love is supposed to feel like. Healthy love is not chaotic, unpredictable, or painful. It is stable, supportive, and nurturing. When you're used to dysfunction, calmness can feel boring and kindness can feel suspicious. But over time, through self-work, therapy, or supportive relationships, your nervous system can adjust. You can recondition your emotional responses so that healthy love no longer feels like a threat, but like home. It's also important to communicate these experiences with your partner. No one can read your emotional history, but the right person will be willing to understand it. Sharing that certain behaviors or emotions are coming from past trauma, not from something the other person did, can open up a space for empathy and connection. Relationships are not supposed to heal all your wounds, but a supportive partner can walk with you as you do your own healing. In the end, love doesn't just expose trauma. It also provides an opportunity to heal it. But healing requires courage. It requires facing discomfort, being honest with yourself, and staying present even when old fears arise. The process is rarely easy, but it's always worth it. Because once those old wounds begin to heal, you become more open, more resilient, and more able to receive love fully, not with fear, but with freedom. One of the most overlooked reasons people fear love is because it takes away something we are deeply attached to: control. In our daily lives, most of us seek control in order to feel safe. We structure our routines, manage our emotions, and build psychological walls to protect ourselves from unpredictability and pain. Control gives us the sense that we are managing life, that we are minimizing risk. But love, real love, disrupts that sense of control. It asks us to surrender, to let go of emotional certainty and allow someone else into our carefully managed inner world. And for many people, this is terrifying. Being in control means being able to predict outcomes. It means knowing what to expect, reducing surprises, and avoiding discomfort. We do this emotionally by setting boundaries, distancing ourselves, or avoiding deep connection altogether. When we're not emotionally invested in someone, we're not vulnerable to their actions. If they disappoint us, it barely affects us. If they leave, it doesn't hurt much. That's the safety of emotional detachment. It allows us to protect our sense of well-being by never fully opening up. But the moment we start to care about someone, deeply care, that protective barrier starts to break down. When you begin to love someone, your emotional world starts to shift. Suddenly, another person's actions, moods, or words can affect you deeply. You begin to feel vulnerable to their choices. You can't predict everything anymore. You can't guarantee how long they'll stay. You can't be sure how they'll change. And you can't force love to follow a schedule or a formula. This emotional unpredictability makes many people panic. Love introduces uncertainty, and uncertainty is often seen by the brain as danger. The result is that many people instinctively try to regain control when love starts to feel too powerful. This might show up as trying to define the relationship too early, becoming possessive, withdrawing to avoid dependency, or even ending a relationship before it has a chance to deepen. These are not just personality quirks or preferences. They are defense mechanisms rooted in fear. The unconscious logic is, if I control this now, I can avoid getting hurt later. But that very need for control is what ends up suffocating the potential for intimacy. There is also a false sense of emotional safety in independence. Modern culture often glorifies emotional self-sufficiency, being unbothered, needing no one, handling everything alone. While independence is important, the over-identification with being emotionally self-contained can become a shield. It can keep people from ever depending on others, from asking for support, or from expressing emotional needs. In love, this shows up as difficulty in letting someone be there for you. You may convince yourself that you don't need affection, reassurance, or closeness, not because you don't want it, but because needing it feels like giving up control. This desire for control is also connected to past pain. If someone has been betrayed, abandoned, or disappointed in the past, they may associate emotional openness with danger. The brain remembers last time you let someone in, it didn't end well, so it compensates by building stronger walls. You tell yourself that you'll never let anyone have that kind of power again, and in a way that makes sense. It's a form of emotional self-protection, but over time it also becomes a prison. The same strategies that protect you from pain also block you from experiencing real connection. It's important to understand that this fear of losing control isn't a weakness. It's a survival strategy. It's your nervous system trying to keep you safe based on the data it has collected from your life. If love has ever led to chaos or heartbreak in your past, your brain links love with instability. So, when real love begins to develop, the brain sends out warning signals, anxiety, doubt, even panic, not because something is wrong, but because something feels unfamiliar. The brain wants to keep you in a controlled, predictable emotional state, even if that state is lonely or unfulfilling. True intimacy, however, is built not through control, but through trust. It's about trusting yourself to handle emotional risk and trusting someone else with your vulnerability. That doesn't mean ignoring red flags or putting yourself in unsafe situations. It means being willing to feel uncertain, to tolerate emotional exposure, and to remain open even when it feels scary. Letting go of control is not about becoming helpless. It's about understanding that love requires a certain degree of surrender. not surrendering your power, but surrendering the illusion that you can protect yourself from all pain. People often think that if they just stay detached, they won't get hurt, but the truth is, love doesn't just hurt when it ends, it also hurts when it's withheld. A life without love is a life without risk, yes, but also without depth. The avoidance of pain often leads to the avoidance of joy, and the control we cling to becomes the very thing that prevents us from experiencing what we truly long for. So the work is not to eliminate the fear of losing control, but to make peace with it. To recognize it when it shows up, to understand where it comes from, and to gently challenge it. Love will always involve a degree of unpredictability, but that's not a flaw, that's the beauty of it. The fact that love can't be managed, owned, or predicted is what makes it meaningful. It's what makes it real. And when we begin to loosen our grip on control, not all at once, but piece by piece, we give ourselves the chance to experience a kind of love that isn't ruled by fear, but guided by trust. A love that doesn't imprison us in certainty, but frees us to feel fully, live bravely, and connect deeply. One of the most surprising truths about love is that receiving it can often feel more difficult than giving it. Many people long for love, actively search for it, and feel its absence deeply. But when it finally arrives in a real and meaningful form, they may find themselves shrinking back, feeling uneasy, or doubting whether they deserve it. This reaction can be confusing, especially when love is something that is supposedly wanted. But beneath that confusion lies a psychological truth. Not everyone knows how to receive love, especially when it doesn't match what they've learned to expect from their earliest emotional experiences. At the root of this struggle is a sense of unfamiliarity. Human beings tend to find comfort in what is familiar, even if it isn't healthy. If a person has grown up in an environment where love was inconsistent, conditional, or absent altogether, then the nervous system becomes attuned to that pattern. Love, in that context, doesn't feel warm and secure. It feels like something you have to earn, something unstable or fleeting, something that might be taken away at any moment. So when someone comes along and offers genuine, stable love, without drama, without manipulation, without requiring you to prove your worth, it can feel strange, even threatening. This unfamiliarity often triggers discomfort because it doesn't fit the emotional blueprint a person has developed over the years. The brain and body are used to a particular rhythm of attachment, perhaps one marked by emotional highs and lows, anxiety, rejection, or emotional neglect. That's what feels normal, even if it's painful. So when healthy love enters the picture, calm, consistent, and emotionally available, it doesn't align with that internalized pattern. The nervous system doesn't recognize it as love. It feels foreign, and in some cases, the person will start to look for ways to create the kind of emotional instability they are used to, not because they want to sabotage the relationship, but because their body is craving the chaos it associates with affection and intimacy. This pattern can also be reinforced by deeply rooted beliefs about self-worth. Many people carry an unconscious belief that they are not worthy of unconditional love. These beliefs are often formed in early childhood based on how caregivers responded to their needs. If a child's emotional expressions were dismissed, ignored, or punished, they may grow up believing that love must be earned through performance, achievement, or sacrifice. They might believe that being loved for who they truly are is not possible, that they must hide parts of themselves to be accepted. When someone comes along and offers them love without conditions, it challenges this belief. And rather than embracing the love, they may reject it, not because they don't want it, but because it contradicts everything they've come to believe about themselves. The reaction can be subtle. It might show up as questioning the other person's motives. Why do they care about me? What do they see in me? Or it might appear as self-sabotage, creating conflict, pulling away emotionally, or convincing oneself that the relationship can't be real. These responses are not flaws in character, they are symptoms of old emotional wounds. When someone feels unworthy of love, they often preemptively reject it to avoid the pain of eventually losing it. It's an act of emotional self-protection, even though it ultimately leads to isolation. The difficulty in receiving love can also stem from a lack of emotional practice. In many cases, people haven't had enough experiences in their lives where they felt safe, seen, and valued. So when they finally do, they don't have a framework for how to respond. Do they relax? Do they trust it? Do they say thank you? Or do they brace for the moment when it's taken away? The unfamiliarity creates internal tension, and that tension often leads to withdrawal. Receiving love becomes not a moment of comfort, but of internal conflict. Healing this response begins with awareness, understanding that difficulty receiving love is not a failure, but an emotional signal. It's an indication that there are beliefs, patterns, or experiences that need attention and care. It's a call to explore your relationship with yourself and your emotional history. Self-reflection, therapy, journaling, and conversations with emotionally safe people can help begin this process. Learning to sit with discomfort when love is offered, rather than immediately rejecting or doubting it, is a powerful first step. It's also important to practice allowing love in small, manageable ways. Let someone compliment you, and instead of deflecting, just say thank you, accept help when it's offered, allow someone to comfort you when you're in pain rather than pretending you're fine. These moments may feel awkward or uncomfortable at first, but over time, they begin to rewire your emotional responses. The nervous system can be trained to feel safe receiving love, just as it once learned to be afraid of it. Most importantly, developing a sense of worthiness must come from within. If you don't believe you're worthy of love, no amount of external affection will convince you otherwise. You must build a relationship with yourself based on compassion, honesty, and care. That inner foundation makes it possible to receive love from others without fear, guilt, or suspicion, because you no longer see love as a reward you have to earn, but as something that aligns with the truth of who you are. The challenge of receiving love is not about weakness or emotional deficiency. It's about history, conditioning, and healing. But love, real love, has the power to be part of that healing. When met with patience and understanding, it can help dissolve the walls that have been built up over years. And eventually, what once felt foreign can begin to feel natural. What once triggered fear can become a source of safety, and what once felt undeserved can finally be embraced with open arms.